Dio Brando is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure's most prominent villain, being the killer of Noriaki Kakyoin and the father of the greatest stand user ever, Giorno Giovanna. 120 years of pure hatred from the slums of Britain to the mansion in Egypt. Dio Brando is the ultimate villain with one of, if not the greatest metamorphosis as a villain in fiction. Why is this, you may ask? As someone who actively tries out new films, series, and all kinds of different media, no villain has ever been more unique, more interesting, or more better written than Hirohiko Araki's Dio Brando. In today's video, we're going to be talking about why I love Dio so much to make him my #1 favorite villain of all time, and my tastes in villains. So, without further ado, let's begin this bizarre video essay.
You take the battle and it's over, that I've lost my composure, cause I'm staring into space. And now my heart's beating fast, like a baby's caught on new chapter, I'll soon reveal the beast. There's a beast in my soul, and it wants to evolve, keep on pushing me so I can end it. Now the words leave your tongue, where the death power comes from, it's time to do that place that you're condemned to.
So, the thing about my taste in villains is essentially extremely complicated. Sometimes I like my villains cool, like Z Broly. Sometimes I want them to be human, like Tetsuo Shima. Sometimes I want them to be philosophical, like Zamasu. However, all the time, I like a villain who shows his evil through their actions. However, there's something weird about this part. You see, there are villainous actions I like to call generalized actions, and I don't like them in the slightest. In order to properly describe this, I will be using Dragon Ball's Frieza. Frieza destroyed planets and civilizations daily, meaning he killed billions, maybe even trillions of innocent lives. You would think that would make him #1, right? Unfortunately, no. I think the destruction of planets is too generalized, if that makes sense. When Frieza destroys a planet, he's erasing an entire civilization, and while that's hugely evil, it feels too generalized. I want my villains to be more specific with their actions, like sort of on a human level, if you will. When I say human level, I mean someone who can't just destroy whole cities with ease. I mean someone who's closer to or is street level. Who represents that level best to me is Dio Brando. Think about it. Dio can't casually destroy cities. He can cause huge levels of destruction, but he's not overly powered like other villains in fiction. The worst he can do is pick up a car or a road roller and throw it at you, slam it into you, or just beat you to death with it. Dio is no doubt above human level power, but he's not overly powerful to the point that he's doing what I call these generalized actions. His evil deeds are very much on a human level. However, Dio's actions aren't just evil. He's essentially everything I just named of each villain. He's cool, he's philosophical, but he's not human. At least not human in the way I'm explaining it. When I say a villain is human, I mean they have a heart. They're not entirely heartless. Tetsuo Shima from Akira is a prime example of being a human villain. He loves his girlfriend Kaori to death and treats her with the utmost kindness and love, and shows that the only reason he was so destructive and out of control was because of his drugs. When he went cold turkey, he was as calm as can be. He wasn't the overly violent person he was before he went cold turkey. That's exactly what makes Tetsuo human. However, what about Dio? Is he human? For the most part, no, he's not. However, if there is one thing that does make Dio human, it's his love for his mother. Throughout JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Dio is known to love his mother deeply. In fact, the very first episode shows this when he's at his father's grave and talks about how he hated him with every fiber of his being for what he did to his mother. While Dio's actions are insanely inhumane, Dio's love for his mother shows that he still has a heart, even if buried under all his evil. Dio is cool purely because of how menacing he is. If we're counting both parts, Part 3, Dio clearly has more menace to him, but I cannot deny he was not a menace in Part 1. Seriously, what he did to the police in his vampire transformation, what he did to Jonathan in their boxing match, and most of all, what he did to Dyer. Seriously, Part 1 Dio was a menace. In fact, if you asked me who I have more fun playing with in JoJo All-Star Battle R, Part 1 Dio is more fun purely because of his great heat attack. Hearing Takehito Koyasu yelling like a maniac will never not be the best. Not to mention, this is my favorite great heat attack out of the entire game. Just hearing Dio yell, will never not be satisfying. However, back to the official media, Dio's best moment in the entire series that just radiates pure menacing energy has to be the one and only Jotaro v Dio fight. It shows how much Dio has grown from Part 1. With Jonathan, Dio was psychopathic, but only for himself. In this fight, Dio is psychopathic to bait Jotaro. Keep in mind, Dio outside of the Jotaro fight is always calm, composed, and soft-spoken. He knew what he was doing. Now, Dio's philosophical side will never not be one of true, beautiful writing. The fact that he used gravity to describe how fate brings people together is incredible. My favorite part of Dio's philosophy has to be the idea of peace of mind. And the greatest thing is that I genuinely believe it's true. You see, Dio's peace of mind philosophy is explained by the fact that he believes that all human actions towards a specific goal, whether to achieve fame, true love, or power, are attempts to achieve peace of mind. I don't know if Araki took this from a specific philosopher in history, but holy crap, this belongs in a philosophy book. Then, Dio's conclusion to his philosophy is that the true way to achieve peace of mind is by knowing one's inevitable fate. By knowing their inevitable fate would eliminate any anxiety or uncertainty in life. Which is insane to think about because Dio is thinking about foresight. While I don't necessarily agree that knowing your fate would eliminate all anxiety and uncertainty, I would 100% agree with the idea that all of humanity's goal is peace of mind, whether consciously or subconsciously. After all, what is heaven if not peaceful? As a Catholic myself, my goal is to get into heaven, and heaven is peaceful, isn't it? Seriously, I don't know how Araki managed to write such a wise villain who is also cool and has a slight human side to him. However, that leads into my next question. What makes Dio such a legendary villain? If there is one mythological creature I think has been rewritten one too many times, it is 100% the vampire. Why? Because Twilight exists. Look, I'm not digging on Twilight, like what you want, but the idea that vampires sparkle in sunlight and don't get turned into ash is kind of ridiculous if you ask me. The whole point of a vampire is to be a creature of the night, and eliminating their one weakness of sunlight is dumb. I do like classic vampires like Dracula, but I think they're not menacing enough in my opinion. Between Twilight's sparkly vampires and Dracula, Dio is a perfect fusion of both. He is glamorous and handsome like a Twilight vampire, but he keeps the same menace Dracula has, which is incredible because Twilight didn't come out until 2005, whereas Stardust Crusaders' story ended in 1992. This means Dio was the original sparkly vampire. The only difference is that this sucker does not give a crap about romantic feelings. To me, Dio is a true vampire because Araki's unique additions to the vampire biology make sense when you think about it, at least for the most part. In my opinion, Araki's best addition to the vampire biology has to be the hand blood sucking, because I genuinely love this. The idea that a vampire can not only drain his victim's blood through his fangs, but also through his hands is incredible. Now, if you're not a JoJo fan, you're probably wondering if Dio can suck people's blood with his fangs. The answer is yes, he can. We just don't see it as much likely because it's much quicker to drain his victims through his hands than his fangs, which would make sense given it's 2 holes versus 5. How does this work, you may ask? Dio has special vessels in his fingers that specialize in this blood-sucking technique. This applies to every finger, even the thumb. We do see inferences in JoJo that he can suck blood through his fangs, like with the women he's had fun with, because you'll see 2 holes on the side of their neck, a common side of a vampire's fangs. We just don't see him do it because Dio is mostly in combat when we see him, and sucking blood through his hands is a much faster method than sucking blood with his fangs. The second best ability Araki added is the vaporization freezing technique, which is unique to Dio. Essentially, Dio can freeze anyone he touches because he can vaporize the moisture in his body, which lowers his body temperature to sub-zero levels. Then, he transfers his sub-zero body temperature to his opponent, which ends up freezing their limbs. This addition is pretty amazing when you think about it because in traditional media, vampires are cold-blooded, and the amazing idea of Araki adding to that feature and making it even more special to vampire biology is amazing. Now, another thing I like about Araki's depiction of Dio's vampire biology is the removal of many vampire weaknesses. You can't kill Dio with a stake to the heart, you can't kill Dio with a crucifix, you can't even kill him through decapitation. The only way you can kill him is through the sun. Anything else, he'll just regenerate from. If you ask me, I love this addition because it makes him all the more menacing, because keep in mind, Christianity is everywhere now, and that would make it nearly impossible for vampires to live when there are 50 different crosses and crucifixes in one area. Removing that weakness makes sense to me because by removing that weakness, it's easier for a vampire to exist. Not to mention, Araki's addition of regeneration to a vampire makes him more menacing because Dio can regenerate so fast, fire doesn't even affect him. Now, I understand that in traditional media, vampires did not have regeneration, but I feel like giving them regeneration not only adds to the inhuman layer, but also adds to their menace. Like, if you surround a vampire in fire and you see them smirking like a menace whilst walking out unscathed, you'd probably be terrified too. I know I would be. The only addition I'm actually split on is the Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. It's cool, but really, it's the only addition to vampires I think Araki shouldn't have added. Essentially, Dio can shoot out this highly acidic liquid from his eyes, and the reason these look like lasers is that they shoot out from built-up pressure. Think of it as a hose, okay? Cover the opening of a hose, the pressure is going to build and build it, but if you release it at the last second, it's going to burst out like a sort of laser. That's my only problem with the addition of Araki's vampire biology. It doesn't really do anything of use that his other abilities can do. The only time it was useful was when Dio needed to eliminate Jonathan's ability to use Hummel in part 1. Every other time, the Space Ripper Stingy Eyes have been pretty much for show and nothing else. Overall, Hirohiko Araki's additions to vampire biology are good for the most part. I think his depiction of vampires is almost perfect, with the only issue being the Space Ripper Stingy Eyes ability. Other than that, the depiction is practically perfect. Everything else is fine and perfect. Dio is, again I say, a jack-of-all-trades villains. He's philosophical like Zamasu, he's human like Tetsuo, he's cool like Z Broly. That's why he's the perfect villain for me, because he's a perfect balance of all three of these genres of villains. The best part is his metamorphosis as a character is almost as good as the manga adaptation of Akira's Tetsuo Shima. Dio went from a poor broken boy in the slums of England to a worldwide cult leader who is treated like a deity in the span of 95 episodes. 57 if we're not counting Stone Ocean. I count Stone Ocean because it gives us insight into what Dio was doing in 1984 up until 1988. It also expands on Dio as a cult leader, given that Stardust Crusaders does not give us much insight into what Dio was like leading up to the beginning of Stardust Crusaders. Dio's cult is none like any other villains organization I have seen. With other villain organizations like Team Rocket, the Eggman Empire, and Nests, you know the hero and his team are going to win, and they usually do it through sheer willpower. With Dio's cult, however, they have you on the edge of your seat because Dio's minions are not minor antagonists you can simply power through. You have to use your brain and intellect to defeat them. And even then, there have been multiple close times where intellect alone could not help the Stardust Crusaders. Mariah, Endul, Darby brothers, even Vanilla Ice. No, not that Vanilla Ice. I mean the vampire Vanilla Ice. Jeez, I can see why the localization team had to call him Cool Ice instead. Anyway, all of Dio's minions are so deadly, the Stardust Crusaders had to use both brains and brawn to defeat them. The only Dio minion I can name that was defeated just through sheer power was Kakyoin. But I would not count him as a Dio minion since he had a flesh bud put into his brain, meaning he was under mind control. Even Dio himself could not be defeated through pure brawn. Dio is insanely intelligent to the point that he took out Kakyoin and Joseph Joestar and almost added Jotaro to the list. The only reason Dio lost to Jotaro was that he was being too cautious. You're probably wondering what I mean, so let me explain. You see, there's a moment in Dio and Jotaro's fight where the two are fighting. Dio freezes time and is fixing to sever Jotaro's shoulder. However, Jotaro's finger twitches and he jumps back immediately. You see, Dio does not know what to do because he thinks it's a trap. As a viewer, we know that Jotaro can't move in frozen time yet, but Dio doesn't know that. Dio sees Jotaro's finger twitch and thinks that Jotaro can move in frozen time. He's just pretending to be frozen to lure Dio. Dio waits out frozen time because he does not know what to do. Not to mention, Dio tried to end Jotaro 3 times throughout the fight, with this being the first. The second time he tries to ensure that Jotaro is dead by severing his head, but is stopped by Polnareff, giving Jotaro the chance to restart his heart and punch the heck out of Dio's head. The third time is with the steamroller, where Jotaro only survives because of plot armor. Oh, because his stand is similar to Dio's, he can stop time now, which is my only problem with Dio's defeat. We encounter a multitude of stands with similar properties, but only Jotaro and Dio's stands are the ones that get to share an ability. In fact, do you want to know the stupidity of Jotaro's plot armor? This man survives a knife to the frontal lobe. It's not a thin cut or anything. It is lodged deep in there, yet Goober over here does not receive one bit of brain damage. I understand Phineas Gage exists, but even then, Jotaro does not suffer anything from getting a knife to the lobe. Phineas Gage at least suffered a ton of things from it. Jotaro got nothing. This breaks medical standards entirely because 1, you'd be unconscious within seconds due to severe bleeding, and 2, he'd suffer extreme motor and cognitive issues because the frontal lobe handles decision making, and with a knife deep in his frontal lobe, he would become mentally slow. Dio would have just ended him there. Finally, even if he did survive, he would not be the same Jotaro that we all love and know. Phineas Gage, with his brain damage, had severe behavioral changes, yet Jotaro throughout the series is still the same Jotaro. I also want to point out that the frontal lobe contains the primary motor cortex, which would imply that Dio's knife would have made Jotaro unable to voluntarily use his hands. Now, one could argue that Dio is throwing basic kitchen knives, right? Nope, he's using throwing knives, which have a 4 to 5 inch blade length. His knives would 100% reach that area of Jotaro's brain, even with how far back it is. Why? Because the average human brain is 5.5 inches, meaning the knife is way deeper into Jotaro's brain than just the frontal lobe. I'm not a medical expert, but Jotaro is dead. Now, one could argue that Jotaro's hat has metal stuff on it, and you are correct. However, the scene explicitly shows the knife not hitting said metal piece, meaning Jotaro is still dead and gone. Anyway, enough about ranting how Jotaro should have died. Let's get into one thing Dio has done that no villain has done that I have ever seen. Killing the protagonist. Which protagonist? Jonathan Joestar. You see, Jonathan Joestar defeated Dio, leaving Dio as a head, right? Well, just like John Carpenter's The Thing, Dio gets head tentacles and kills Jonathan, taking his body. Keep in mind, this was during part 1, not after. Jonathan was still the protagonist, meaning Dio killed the protagonist. A lot of JoJo fans say that Dio lost in this, but who died and who survived? Riddle me that. Not once have I ever seen a villain kill the protagonist successfully. Dio was the first and only for me. Frieza never killed Goku, no one killed Naruto, no one killed Luffy, protagonists almost never died to their villains, yet Dio took that, flipped it on its head, and killed Jonathan. I understand there have been villains that killed their protagonist, like Cell with Goku, but the difference is Cell had an episode of glory before he got wiped out, while Dio had 100 years of glory with it. However, Dio's worst crime will be something I have never seen a villain do, and it is the most horrendous thing I've ever seen. So, during part 1, a mother was begging Dio to spare her and her child. However, Dio did the next best thing and turned the mother into a zombie and had her eat her whole baby. I'm sorry, but the closest thing I've seen a villain do to this is Frieza killing Dende when he was a kid. Other than that, I have never seen a villain do something so insanely horrendous. In fact, this scene is so horrendous, you cannot find any clips of it on YouTube. Keep in mind, you can find all kinds of uncensored JoJo clips along with Baki clips on there. I also want to point out, this is the same guy who beat up someone for disrespecting his mom. So maybe he does have a heart, or maybe he does not. I don't know. You decide. I'm just saying, Dio made a mom eat her whole baby. That's just pure evil. So yeah, Dio is the greatest villain of all time. I don't know what else to say other than Dio is busted in All-Star Battle R. Though I suppose that I can tease that I'm working on a Mariah video essay soon. So yeah, get hyped for that. I've already said everything I want to say, and repeating all of it in a simplified manner feels lazy. Also, I want to point out that this script for this video is 7 pages long. You could call this my 7-page Muda script. That's a joke for the JoJo fans. Anyways, that's all for now, and this is SJ Raiku signing off. Peace!